Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to a special Sunday edition of the Steelers Preview Podcast. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Joining me, as always, is Dave Schofield, co-editor of Behind the Steel Curtain. Dave, what's going on?
Not much. I'm just sorry if you heard that a little bit. I'm checking out because you're trying something new here.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if it worked, and it's working.
Very, very good. It is working. You're all right. Yes. Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Sorry, I'm more worried about us getting out there with various different things. So, all right.
There you go. Good. Well, let me before we bring Brian in, let me explain. So, we've always just done this show on YouTube. And so what we've done now is we decided to connect it to other platforms as well. And so this time we've connected to our Facebook page, which is the official Behind the Steel Curtain Facebook page, which has over 103,000 likes, I believe, or something like that. So those of us that are in the YouTube realm, you're going to see a lot of new comments, and we're eventually going to go into our Twitter page as well. So that's what Dave's referring to as something a little new. If you don't follow us on Facebook, make sure you do. Go to Behind the Steel Curtain and follow our page. Brian Anthony Davis, podcast producer, what's going on?
This is awesome. We've got Christian, T-Rel, Nancy, Maurice, Tessie. They are in.
This is a whole new level of distraction for Brian.
Yes.
This is,
yeah. Guys, I think I just learned something.
Uh-oh.
Us as the podcasters, we get to see the comments from both Facebook and YouTube. But I understand this right with because I'm watching on two different devices that the YouTube comments are only on YouTube and the Facebook comments are only on Facebook. So when we click one to bring up, people might not see it otherwise.
Well, it's perfect because my wife and I, this is not to get on a side spiel here, but my wife and I, whenever we have like friends and we try to merge friend groups, you're always concerned, like you're concerned that the two friend groups aren't going to get along. I honestly was concerned. The YouTube group is such a close-knit group. I was afraid that they were like, who are all these Facebook people? What are they doing here? But as it turns out, that's awesome. Good to know, Dave. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If you're new to us on Facebook and you've never checked us out before, the live chat is so awesome because we are one huge family here. And it's, people that we see every single week, and we're glad to welcome you into our family.
Absolutely. Well, let's get this show off. This is about the Steelers, and they're getting ready to play the Washington football team on Monday evening. I've determined that 5 p.m. is considered evening, not afternoon.
Pre-evening. It's pre-evening.
There you go. We have a lot of news to talk about here, guys. A lot of news, believe it or not. So the Steelers did not clinch a playoff berth by not winning or not playing today because the Indianapolis Colts, they beat the Texans. The Las Vegas Raiders barely beat the Jets. And the Miami Dolphins beat the Cincinnati Bengals. So one of those three teams, in the Browns, I believe, if the Browns would have lost, they also would have equated in a clinch, right, Dave?
It was the Dolphins.
Okay.
The Browns losing would have added to where, if a bunch of other things happened, the Steelers could have clinched the North.
The North, okay.
But that was a whole different scenario.
Right. So the Steelers did not clinch a playoff berth without playing, but if they do win on Monday night, they clinch a playoff berth. So let's keep all things considered. But let's talk about the real news here. The real news is the Steelers roster is, in a lot of ways, not in shambles, but it's definitely up for grabs in certain spots. First and foremost, the most important news, Ben Roethlisberger is slated to be playing. Brian, did you ever think that Ben wasn't going to play this week?
I didn't. I really thought he was going to play, but then it starts creeping in and you start watching it more and more. You're worrying that is there something that can happen, that Mason Rudolph's in there, and all of a sudden, 11-0 looks a lot closer to starting over.
Dave, what about you? Did you ever think Ben wasn't going to play?
Nope. Didn't have any doubt. Put that on Twitter. Took a little bit of heat for it because of that. But where I said, come on. I mean, this is exactly what happened when he wasn't able to practice against the Cincinnati Bengals. That he did the walkthrough and then he still played. So it's not like you're in uncharted territory of Ben not practicing. On a normal week, Ben does not practice until Thursday, 4 days removed from a game. When's 4 days removed from last game? Sunday. That's why he didn't do anything until Sunday. He already showed that he could play well without a practice when that was forced on him earlier. And they're probably thinking we're better off having a rested Ben than a practiced Ben. And people that were saying, well, they say he's questionable because they had to, because he didn't practice in any of their 3 injury reports. You got to say something. And they took away the probable status a couple years ago, which Jeff had to remind me of earlier in the season because I couldn't remember which one was gone. So I think he would have been probable if they were allowed to say that, but because he didn't practice at all, they had to put something. And then people asked the question, well, why did it say not injury related /knee? They just kept the same designation from last week because he started off the week not injury related, and then he didn't play another day. And they said, well, let's throw in /knee. And then they just kept it. I think they're screwing around with the NFL more than anything. But yeah, Ben was going to play.
To me, this goes back to 2016. If y'all remember, in the AFC Championship game against New England, Le'Veon Bell got hurt. And it was his what? It was his groin. He hurt his groin. And they said, oh, this is an injury he's dealt with for weeks. And was he ever listed on any injury report for it? No. And I'm pretty sure the Steelers got fined for that. I could be wrong, but I at least know that the NFL, Brian, you're shaking your head, they did get fined
I believe they did, yes.
So what they're doing now is kind of New England Patriot-esque. We're giving Ben the week off, so we're just going to put a /knee on there because back in Dallas, he left the game early because of the knees. And so we'll just say it's a knee because we have to give him something so that if he doesn't practice. And then I also do believe that if they don't practice, you have to give him some type of designation like Dave said. So I was getting texts from people, is Ben going to play? I'm with Dave. I thought for sure he was going to play the whole time. I would have been absolutely stunned if he didn't play. Now, there's other injury news. Chris Boswell, he was listed as questionable with a hip. Now he's been downgraded to doubtful. They might as well just say he's out. He's not going to play.
They've never had a doubtful person actually play in the game. And how many years now is it, Jeff? It's at least 3, I'm pretty sure.
It's been a long time.
It might be longer. It's as long as I've been with BTSC.
Well, they don't even
never had a doubtful.
Rarely do they have a doubtful ever, like you said. I mean, it's always questionable or you're out. Yeah. So with this, it looks like Matthew Wright, I think I got his name correct, is going to be the kicker. I think this is the right call. And I said this on the Injury Report podcast last week when Boswell popped up on the Injury Report with a hip. I said, I would want Matthew Wright kicking, even if Boswell thinks he's okay. Because as a kicker, the one thing you don't want to have happen is in the middle of a game, it gets worse or you're unable to kick, and then you're really screwed and you have nothing. So I'd rather go with a healthy kicker. Brian, what's your take on Matthew Wright? I know you love your kickers. What's your take on his body of work?
Well, I was looking up the Central Florida grad's middle name, and I haven't found it yet. As long as it's not Wide. If it's Matthew Wide Wright, we're in tons of trouble. So I haven't found anything yet. It looks like he may be wearing number 16 or in camp. He wore 16. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter what he wears. As long as he's focused and ready to go. Yeah, I love my kickers. I love giving nicknames to my kickers. I love Boz. I love Merry Christmas, Chris Brown. I love those names for these guys. But really, with Matthew Wright, let's hope that it's Matthew Wright on. That's all I'm looking for. And you know what? I think he's going to be ready for this game. I remember back in week 5 in 2015. Brought in this guy from Rice. It's Chris Boswell. Nobody knows anything about him. 4th kicker of the year because you went through Garrett Hartley, Sean Sweezum got hurt, and then the guy Scobie.
The Scobie debacle.
Yeah. So the 4th guy comes in week 5, and you're like, who is this guy? Everybody's worried because they don't know anything about this guy. And next thing you know, he's great almost every single year. 18 was rough for him, and we think there was an injury back then. So I believe that Matthew Wright will come in focused and ready and wanting to show off what he's got.
Yeah, it was just a couple years ago, wasn't it, that Boswell missed a game? It was for something. That's when they brought in Randy Bullock, I believe.
Yeah.
And he kicked a game for him. And then
played well.
Yeah.
And that's why Cincinnati
he got a job with Cincinnati, he's still there. So Matthew Wright is going to be determined to do well. There's still a need for kickers in this league. I mean, you see some of these kickers, like how are they still employed in the National Football League? Go ahead, Brian.
That was 2016. I believe it was at the New York Giants. Or no, it was at home against the New York Giants. Yeah. And Bullock came in, played really well. And like you said, he landed a job and he's still there.
Yeah. So a little motivation there for Mr. Wright. Hopefully not wide right. Super chat from Kyle Smith, $5. Thank you very much. He said, did you hear what Cowherd said this week? He sounded personally offended by the Steelers being 11-0. Maybe a Steeler had a 2 a.m. rendezvous with his ex-wife. I will get to Mr. Cowherd's take here in a little bit. I want to get through this news, but at the same time, hey, this is right up your alley, Brian. I'll put this up there. Just a Fan says, oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. Just a Fan says, if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. That's
I
right
did
up
see
your
that.
alley.
And
That's
I was
right
laughing because I was about to bring up, right before I saw that, I was about to bring up Ben Roethlisberger was in a music video right after they won the Super Bowl. It was by a local country band, and it's like, I might not be Mr. Right, but I'm Mr. Right now.
That's good. That
sounds
works for
like
me.
your theme song there,
Yes.
Bad.
All right, hey, Brian, you got a job now. Snowman puts $5 in the tip jar. Thank you very much. He said, any stats on Matthew Wright? I don't think he's ever played in the league.
Not in the NFL. I'll see what I can do and see if I can get some college stats here before the end of this half a show.
Okay. All right, so let's go to some other news. James Conner is eligible to be taken off the reserve COVID list, but is being reported by Adam Schefter and a couple others that he is not likely to play on Monday. Steven Nelson, cornerback, who's dealing with a knee injury that is not serious enough that they had to put him on short-term IR, but serious enough that they had to have an MRI taken on Thursday. Take that for what it's worth. He's not likely to play, and they're going to put Cam Sutton out there. Now, guys, my question for you, and I've talked about this a lot on my Injury Report podcast and things like that. For the first time in a long time, the Steelers actually have options at cornerback. They actually have some depth there. So if you were sculpting the plan for Keith Butler, we know Cam Sutton's going to start on the outside. 4-year veteran, that makes sense. But when they go into their dime package, their sub package, that's where Cam Sutton normally goes in and does his role of the dime package. In the dime, do you think they stick with Sutton on the outside and move Lane to the dime package role, or do they put Lane on the outside and move Sutton back to his normal spot? Brian, what do you think they'll do?
It all goes down to if there's a guy that they just aren't sure about. I'm pretty sure that they know everything that they've got in a guy like Cam Sutton. I think they love Cam Sutton. I think they have no reservations putting him in whatsoever. If they have any reservations about Justin Lane, then they'll go ahead and put Lane in on that spot and in the dime move over Cam Sutton. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they trust both of these guys.
Yeah, I think so too. Dave, what do you think about how they're going to use their sub packages with Nelson assumingly being out?
Yeah, I was also looking up the stats, so I could say Seattle has 2 losses, but they had another one today. So what are they down to? 4 now? It's going to they're still going to use Cam Sutton in his sub package role. He, like you said, Justin Lane's going to come in, I think, on the outside, and Sutton's going to be in there. But when they're in base, it's going to be Sutton sticking there, much like we said with Stephon Tuitt being out last week, what they were going to do with Alualu, that he'll be in his position when it's base defense, but he would probably stay out more as the other defensive tackle whenever they went to sub package. So it's, one of those things where he's going to be on the field more, but it doesn't mean that he's not going to be in there in the role that he had been in the past. Yeah. That's just my take.
I think so. The less moving parts, I think, is best. So if Sutton is comfortable in the dime spot, Lane has played in that role. He's come in and played on the outside. I think he'll do just fine. But this Washington football team is a talented group. We're going to talk about that in certain areas. But last news is that Stephon Tuitt has been taken off the reserve COVID list. He will be back on Monday. I think that is absolutely huge in this game, especially on short rest and now without Bud Dupree. Guys, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being this is gigantic, 1 being doesn't matter at all, how do you rate Tuitt coming back in terms of that scale? Brian, we'll start with you.
91.
91. I love it.
Huge.
Yes. 91.
It's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And Brian's right, because not only is he coming back, that you want to take that. I mean, think about it. Who's the top 3 leaders in sacks for the Steelers? TJ Watt, number 1, Bud Dupree, number 2, Stephon Tuitt, number 3. Getting him back with no more Bud Dupree is very key. And not only that, yes, the Steelers are on short rest, but not Stephon Tuitt, because he did not play on Wednesday. He should be rested and ready to roll.
Tuitt's a big deal. Like I said, I'd say it's a 9 or a 91, as Brian said. So either way, Here's my next question for you guys. So we're kind of getting away from the news. I'm looking at, I was getting my stuff together for the Let's Ride podcast, which, by the way, if you're seeing us on Facebook and you're like, what are they talking about with these podcasts? Check out our podcast platform, anywhere where you get your podcasts. Literally search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, follow us. We have a lot of content that's not just here on YouTube. It's also just audio studio-based shows. So my Let's Ride podcast is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I look up all these stats about the teams and rankings and stuff. Would you all say that this Washington defense is the best defense that they've played so far this season? Just listen to these numbers as of now. The Washington defense in terms of, this is heading into week 13, obviously. In terms of yards, average per game, 4th. Passing yards per game, 2nd. Rushing yards per game, 15th. Points per game, 7th. Guys, is this the best defense the Steelers offense is going to go against? I kind of looked at the schedule. Maybe outside of Baltimore twice. I think it is. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, because I also talked about it on my Stat Geek podcast on Thursday when I broke all these down.
That was a long time ago, Dave.
I know. Well, yeah, but still.
I know.
When you look at pass defense, the Steelers are up to the number 1 pass defense with Washington being 2. I mean, you don't get any closer than these two teams. They are very evenly matched on defense. But it's when you get into those other key statistics that I also like to cover on that show is where you see some big separation. I mean, even in sacks, they're really close. You know, everyone, if you're a Steelers fan, unless you're coming out from underneath the rock, Steelers are number 1 in the NFL in sacks.
Oh, really?
Washington is tied for 2nd.
Yes.
They're tied for 2nd. Now they're 5 behind, but they're tied for 2nd going into this week because we don't count Sunday's games yet because they just don't count.
All right. What about you, Brian? Is this the best defense the Steelers have faced so far this year?
Yes, it is. But here's the thing, though, that we really need to look at here. And it's a good thing because if you look at all of these categories, Washington only beats Pittsburgh in one of the top 8 categories. And that's pretty much rushing offense, where they rank 19th and Pittsburgh ranks 25th. Now, the reason I'm saying that is we know how the Steelers like to circumvent the running game by working on those quick passes. And that's something that could really help take that running game, that the fact that they are 15th against the run, that's probably their lowest category. And that's going to help. So the Steelers can still try to run the ball, but they have something that they can go ahead and do. And we know that's something that they do. But the one category that's not on here, you mentioned that they're 3rd in sacks. However, Pittsburgh is number 1, I believe, in allowing sacks. They have kept Ben Roethlisberger clean for the last 4 games. He's only been sacked 10 times this season, and there's been 11 games. So that's less than 1 sack a game. That is huge. And it's how many times that I don't have this stat. And Dave, this is something that you could check out for me. How many times has Alex Smith and company, including Dwayne Haskins, how many times have they been sacked?
Oh, I got it right here. 35.
Okay. 35, tied for 29th in the NFL.
35 times.
So that means only 2 teams going into this week had more sacks given up, one of which was Philadelphia. And who was the other one? You remember who the other one was? I don't remember who the other one was.
So
Philly.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 big categories, the Steelers lead here. So that's pretty huge. And I'm looking at this as, every category, if Washington's good, Pittsburgh's 1 or 2 better. So that's something to look at. But the one thing that's not on here, motivation is even bigger this week. The Giants won. So the Giants are now, they're still a game and a half.
5-7.
Yeah, so the Giants are 5-7. If Washington wins, they are still the 2nd place team. And I didn't realize that. Dave thankfully corrected me this week because I was thinking they were tied for 1st.
Giants have beat them twice. That's why.
And so that's why I'm glad you corrected me on that. But the thing about it, as far as motivation, I keep talking about that chip on the Steelers' shoulder. It is not a chocolate chip. It's not a tortilla chip. It's a giant boulder of a chip on that shoulder. And when you have, and you've mentioned Cowherd and everybody in the national media, fans, people at work, everybody's saying that they might be 11-0, but they're not that good. You think they're not hearing it? You think that's not a major category here? And when their head coach comes and says, us sucking is the reason why we had problems here and there and everywhere, Well, you know what it does? If they don't listen to that, then they're crazy. If they don't think the finger's been pointing at them, they're not doing their jobs. They have more pride than that. That's the category that I'm looking at. This is a great defense, to go back to the original question, but the Steelers will be able to handle it if they listen to their coach and they hear that outside noise, but then drown it out when it's time to play and just get down to business.
When I was looking at the stats for this game, honestly, I asked myself, how is this team 4-7? The defensive statistics are really good, but there's one area where they're really lagging, and that is turnover differential. Pittsburgh is plus 12, the top team in the NFL, plus 12 in turnover differential. Washington is minus five. So they're not taking the ball away, and they're not really protecting the ball. And then we also have to remember too, they went through some really bad quarterback play when Dwayne Haskins started for him. And then who was the guy that played in between before he hurt him? He got hurt.
Kyle
Allen, I think.
Yeah, he was with Rivera last year.
Yeah.
I think they would have been better off with another D Haskins. That's Mr. Haskins, Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell. I feel like you've brought Mr. Belding up like in at least 3 episodes. I don't know how that's even possible.
Dennis Haskins, you've done it.
Love me some Saved by the Bell from way back.
All right, let's get to the next topic. A lot of people have actually talked about this in the live chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Guys, the running game for the Steelers. Are we at the point now where you just say screw it and we're just gonna go with what works? And what works right now is you spread them out and you say, we're going to get the ball out of Ben's hands so fast, you're not going to be able to get to us. So the 36 sacks that Washington has accrued, good luck, because you're not going to be able to get to Ben in time. And then do you have the secondary to slow down all of the weapons? Are we at the point where it's literally just, why are we even trying to run the ball anymore? Let's just be a passing team, and we'll throw it when we have to throw. We'll run it when we have to run it. I don't even know if they're capable of that, because I don't think they can run it whenever they just want to run it, because they can't run it on 3rd or 4th and 1 and get the yard. Dave, talk to me. You're an offensive line guy. What the heck's going on, and what should the philosophy be going into this game?
The philosophy is, I think you're mostly right. The biggest problem that they have with running the ball, and I've said it for season and a half now,
predictability.
The other team always knows when you're running the ball.
Yep.
You tell them you're running the ball before you run the ball. And when you do that, guess what they're going to try to do? Stop you from running the ball. So the best way for the Steelers to run the ball is to come out. I mean, if that's what they choose to do, I'm not saying it's the best way. That's probably, I spoke too soon. I'm getting ahead of myself. If the Steelers want to come out and just quick throw, take a shot, quick throw, and then out of the same formations and everything, sneak in a run, how much you want to bet that run's going to be efficient? They either need to, even when they kind of set up that they're going to run the ball, they still don't necessarily even run the ball in a way that's conducive to their own running backs and their own linemen. So it's like they just don't seem like they're on the same page when it comes to having to figure out what they're doing running the ball. So if that's the case, one of the best things, they say you can use the run to set up the pass. Well, you can also use the pass to set up the run. And the only reason that you do that is because you sneak it in there every so often that the team might not be ready for it. But how many times do we, just as fans watching the team, so-and-so's there, you see the formation, you see the personnel, they're running, and most of the time you even know where they're running. So That's the biggest problem.
What about you, Brian? What are your thoughts on the running game?
About 25 years ago, I joined a bowling league. And what happened was I was a pretty good bowler. My first time with this team, this old Harbs of a guy came up to me and said, "Oh, you can't throw it that way. You're throwing it awkward. You've got to do it this way." By the end of the night, I could not move my arm because he wanted to cookie cutter me. He wanted me to move to what worked for him and what should work for everybody else. But I couldn't do it, and my game was horrible. I couldn't even roll the bowling ball. So why am I saying that? And I see Jeff getting ready to laugh like crazy. Look, after a while, what you're supposed to be doing, if it's not working for you, and the thing that you figured out how to do, whether it's unorthodox or whether it only works for you but it's against conventional wisdom. And if it's working, you just do it and you keep up with it. You might go back and try it every once in a while here and there. You might get some success with it. But if this is working for the Steelers, keep it going. You're going to get more strikes that way. And when I say strikes, I'm talking touchdown strikes.
The one thing I wish the Steelers would do more often, I'm okay with spreading them out, but I'd like them to have a back next to Ben a little bit more. Because when you have a back next to him, you have the threat of a run, whether it's a draw, whether it's a screen, whether it's a swing pass. And this is something I said it on our post-game podcast on Wednesday night after the Ravens game when blowhard Chris Collinsworth said it. I was like, man, he's actually right. I can't believe it. Yeah, I said that about Chris Collinsworth, Brian. He's horrible. Anyways.
I love Collinsworth.
He said that the Steelers would like Anthony McFarland to be like a Le'Veon Bell type. Someone that can play out of the backfield, catches the ball well, good in space. And I went back to 2014, 2015, and even 2016, the prime of Le'Veon Bell's career. How many times did we see those little slip passes out into the flat when he would just break contain and then gone for 15 yards? They can still do that. They could do that but when you go empty, that's as predictable as Dave was talking about the run game. There's no threat to run when you go 5 wide and you have an empty set. Doesn't mean it's not going to be successful, but this is something I'm anxious to see how the Steelers offense is going to evolve, because it is going to evolve. And maybe it does evolve into more of a pass-happy attack. So be it. To me, this is a results-based industry. If the results are good and you're winning football games, then why buck the trend? But if you're struggling, then you need to reevaluate. Now, Mike Tomlin did say that they're looking to really emphasize the running game. I would expect them to come out and really try to run the ball on Monday night. Do I agree with that? No, I don't. But that's what they're going to do. You heard it here first. Okay. Brian, you were the one that thought of the headline for this episode. So I want to talk about this before we actually head into our first break. For those that are watching on YouTube or Facebook, we're not going anywhere. It's just for audio purposes. Go ahead and introduce this segment here, and we'll talk about it for our break.
So why the Steelers may be a perfect team for an imperfect year. The reason I brought that up, and I was thinking about that, this is the weirdest year that most of us have ever experienced. If you have had more of a tumultuous year in the past, then I feel sorry for you. And I hope you're making the most out of this year. What the Steelers are doing, this is an imperfect year. Everybody is talking. We talked about the cowherds of the world. We talked about your buddies at work, and everybody's that's saying that this team is not very good for an 11-0 team. They haven't played anybody, is what they're saying. That they're dropping passes. They can't run the ball. They're terrible. But maybe, just maybe, that this team that's unorthodox, like my bowling story, that is not doing it the way that everybody else is supposed to do it. Maybe the fact that they're not a cookie cutter team, they're not the team that everybody expects an 11-0 team to be, but maybe they're just perfect for an imperfect 2020.
That's a good point. Dave, what do you think about that?
The imperfect 2020, I think, is a good way to put it just in general. But it's interesting because I had right when their game was getting started today, I checked in with one of my friends who's a Tennessee Titans fan. Boy, they had a rough one today, didn't they? But he actually said the Steelers need to actually beat somebody good. I'm like, did they get a choice? Said, first of all, they already beat the Titans. And he's like, well, that's the best team they've played. I'm like, you say that now, not after you got embarrassed and almost came back and made it quite interesting there with the Browns, but you got embarrassed by the Browns, so that you can't say that the Browns don't win. Win doesn't mean anything, but all the Steelers can do is play the teams they're scheduled to play. That's really all they can do. And what do you want? Do you want a terrible loss on your resume like the Tennessee Titans have, where they lost to the two? Wait, I'm going to get it wrong. Is it 2-7-1 now? I think Cincinnati Bengals.
Well, they lost now. They're 2.
Because I know the Bengals have a tie.
2-9-1.
Is it 2-9? Yeah. I can't even remember. I can't even get the numbers right now. But I mean, seriously, Do you think, would you feel better with the Steelers dropping a game like that? Everyone's complaining about them being this, but Brian's right. It's a very strange year with everything going on, and people just are trying to discredit the Steelers as much as they can based on this, that, or the other. And everyone's all about the eye test. The last time I checked, the eye test doesn't mean squat in the NFL. It really doesn't. You need it in college football in order to get the right votes to be positioned right in order to play. Eye test doesn't matter. What matters is the wins and losses, and that's it. So
yeah,
they're just figuring out a way, and it's funny because the last few weeks, even like I know some people were a little bit nervous with Jacksonville at the beginning. I wasn't nervous with Jacksonville. Some people were getting a little bit more nervous. I've actually been more calm in recent weeks because for something about this team just shows me that they keep finding a way. And that's what you have to do in this 2020 season is you just got to find a way.
Well, and in this 2020 season, if we've learned anything, is that it is literally a week-to-week league. Not just from a who could win and who could lose, but who are you going to have available to you? When are you going to play? Is your game going to get delayed? How many days is it going to get delayed? How many times is it going to get delayed? I mean, my gosh, we literally saw this just last week with the Ravens. The Ravens were decimated by the coronavirus and COVID-19. Other teams have been decimated. We know injuries are always common. In a year that is literally, you don't know what's going to happen every single week. The fact that the Steelers are 11-0, I think that's something you hang your hat on. That's not something you should have to justify. I've said it before on my own podcast. I'll say it again. I am done justifying wins for the Steelers. You go and you play the game and you win the game. Boom. You win by 1, you win by 50. No one's going to look back at the 2020 regular season schedule and see a Steelers team that, look at this game in week 12. This Baltimore game, see that asterisk there? See, the Ravens game got delayed because they had COVID issues, and so that win doesn't really count as much. No one's going to see that. It's just going to show up as a W. It might look weird as a Wednesday game, but it's just going to show up as a win. The Steelers are the perfect team in an imperfect year. I couldn't agree more. So what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next is we are going to take a short break. If you're watching us live on Facebook or on YouTube, we're not going anywhere. This is just for audio. If you're listening on our audio side, go over to part 2 where we talk about X factors, predictions, and more.
And your Matt Wright stats.
Yeah, that's right. Matt Wright. We'll be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to part 2 of the Pittsburgh Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Joining me as always, the other co-editor, Dave Schofield, and the podcast producer, Brian Anthony Davis. Melvin, a longtime listener, gives us $2 in the tip jar. Melvin, you didn't put a question there, brother. Put that in there, and we'll get it up on the screen for sure.
He did it twice. We owe him 2. He's done it 2 times. I'll keep my eye on it, Melvin.
All right, thanks. Yeah. And we'll just put up a comment then. Stop points don't matter. All right. Okay. Let's get into the second part. You have Matt Wright stats.
I have Matt Wright stats. At the end.
Give us
all you have is college stats because he has not kicked in the NFL.
Where did he play?
University of Central Florida.
Great.
Okay.
Cover.
Now, not a ton of field goal stats, believe it or not, but he kicked for 4 years. It looked like he was definitely the starting kicker, the only kicker the last 2 years. Just listen to these extra points his junior and senior year for UCF. His senior year, he was 74 for 74 in extra points. And his junior year, he was 80 for 81 in extra points. So in 2 years in college football, he was 154 of 155 extra points.
Well, but that's still those little chip shots there.
Yeah, but it's still college.
Yeah.
Because you're probably dealing with more blocks and stuff there. When it comes to his field goals, I can't get them listed out. I really wish I could get like his long or whatever it is, but I'm trying to find that still. But he was 13 for 18 as a junior. He was 12 for 14 as a senior. As a sophomore, he was 17 for 22. But I'm really struggling with actually getting lengths on those kicks, but that's the best I could do.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. This is the time in the show we always go to our X factors. We go to an offensive player and a defensive player. a player that we think is going to be a force one way or the other for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this upcoming game. Now, I do have to remind Brian at times that this is when we pick an offensive player for the Steelers in the upcoming game. He has a tendency to think outside the box a little too much. So let's go with offense first, guys. Who is your offensive X factor? Brian, we'll start with you.
It's Diontae Johnson. And the reason it's Diontae is this. 3 big drops last week. I think he knows that the us sucking comment was not just labeled to everybody on the team. It was, but it was emphasized. If this was on Facebook or like on your text chat, you would put the little exclamation points for emphasis. There was emphasis going towards Diontae Johnson, among others, but he really needs to step it up. And he's the guy that makes this short offense work better than anybody because he has the jets to make a small catch turn into a lot of yards if he just holds on to it. Right now, his record of dropping passes this year, I don't have the stat in front of me, but it's under 60%, a lot closer to 50%. So if he can catch more balls and take off, he's going to have a huge game. I think he took that speech to heart. I think you're going to see a lot of number 18 in this game, and the Washington football team will not be able to stop him.
What about you, Dave? What do you think?
So that's a half. If we're going to count how many times we call him the wrong name, I'm calling that one a half. Okay. The over under was 3. So that'll be interesting. Offensive. I was going to go broader, but I'm going to get more specific. I'm going to go with JC Hassenauer. I was going to say the entire offensive line, but if Hassenauer's playing now, I am going to put a little thing out there. I don't want to get Steelers fans' hopes up, but they still have 2 open roster spots that were not filled today, which means they can be filled tomorrow. I'm not sure. Usually it's 4 p.m. the day before. I don't know because it's COVID spots or whatever. We know that Matthew Wright's going to be one of those. You could still elevate 2 people off anyway without a COVID designation. Are any of the other COVID guys coming back? They have not said that they are. They're not expected to, but they haven't said for sure that they're not. So could a Marquise Pouncey slide back in for this game? That would be fantastic. He'd be a guy that could play without practice. But I'm assuming that he's not. If not, the Steelers have to bring up another offensive lineman in order to have 8 to dress, in order to get to their 48. Yes. So, but it's the entire offensive line. But if Hassenauer is going to be playing it in the middle again, and the Steelers have gone against very good defensive fronts this season. They've played the Eagles. They have a very good defensive front. I would even say the Titans have a decent defensive front depending on who's available. And, of course, the Baltimore Ravens, especially the first time. But this is more of a complete defense, I think, as a whole that they've probably seen. Not that Washington's pass defense is outstanding, but it's there. Meaning just from the secondary. Obviously, they're good because of where they rank. So they've got to protect Ben. They've got to make sure that he is, he's getting the ball off quick anyway. But you've got to be able to communicate well to pick up your protections to make sure you protect Ben, and that all starts with your center.
I don't think Pouncey's going to be available because if he tested positive, even if he? We don't know. I mean, the only way he wouldn't is if he was just a close contact, in which case it's 5 days. It's 5 days, which 5 days would be tomorrow, which would be Monday. They announced
that all the game day tests, which one is it? The one that's the longer test? They ran the short test. And then they ran the long test. They ran the short test to see what they're going. And they announced that all the long tests for both teams came back negative. Were they not counting Pouncey in that? Or was he something else?
So if he was a high risk contact, maybe like Stephon Tuitt was, I'm assuming, because Tuitt wasn't on the list for very long.
Then Monday he's good.
Then Monday he could be released off that list. So we'll see. For me, I'm going to go with Eric Ebron because I think that it's pretty clear that Ebron and the Ebron and Roethlisberger connection is really starting to heat up. But Ebron's got to do his part, and that means. Like what Brian said about Diontae Johnson. I mean, you got to catch the ball. And I think that Ebron is the type of athlete that I think Ben Roethlisberger has wanted since forever. I mean, because he loved Heath Miller. Everyone loved Heath Miller, but Heath Miller was not the athlete that Eric Ebron is. Heath Miller was a better blocker than Ebron, but I think Eric Ebron is a guy that can really make this offense go into a different dimension. And so that's why he's my offensive X factor. Let's go to defense now. Defensive X factor. Brian, we'll start with you again.
I think it's Cam Sutton.
Okay.
I mean, coming in for Steven Nelson, I think that when he does come in, he usually makes plays. I could see him making an interception in this game. I'm not going to call it a pick six, but I could see him robbing somebody of the football because they are going to go his way more than they will Joe Hayden if they possibly can. Now, Joe Hayden gets attacked a whole lot more. That's why he does have the interceptions that he does. But I think they're going to go towards Cam, and Cam is going to make him pay for it.
All right, that's a good one. Dave, what do you think? X factor defense.
Oh, good. He set me up with the easy one. It's Alex Highsmith coming in to get the start on the edge in place of Bud Dupree. Now, it's interesting because if you really want to believe the grades of Pro Football Focus, they have Highsmith graded way above Bud Dupree. They have always been down on Bud Dupree, like 25 points higher than Bud Dupree. They have him in his small sample size. So, and they have Bud Dupree as being the weakest link by far on the Steelers defensive front. Now, do Steeler fans and people that are actually watching the games and looking at everything holistically actually believe that? I don't think so. I'm just saying that the Steelers defensive front is so good. Like I've said to Brian before, that's, being the weakest link on the Steelers defensive front is like being the ugliest supermodel on the runway. I mean, come on. But Highsmith, now you have someone that is going to be there just basically from an inexperienced standpoint, that if the Washington football team is smart, they're going to try to see what they can do and exploit him probably even more in the run than anything else. So he's got to be able to step up, do his part, set the edge, step up, be the player that Steelers Nation knows that he is and can be, and the Steelers defense will be fine.
I'm going to go with Stephon Tuitt for my X factor because I think that Tuitt, without Dupree, everyone's going to be sliding protection schemes towards Watt. That's just what they're going to do. They're going to make sure that the offensive line is going to be sliding his way. So it's going to be up to Stephon Tuitt to stay healthy, to be a force that he has been so far this season. He's had a tremendous year so far. To be the force that he has been, because it's going to open up things for Watt on the outside. Similar to what you said, Dave, Cam Hayward on the other side, if he can be Wreck-It Cam that we know he can be, it's going to make life a lot easier for Alex Highsmith in his first game. I think that, well, let me ask you this, Dave, because you brought it up and I want to talk about it. What do you think the split's going to be percentage snap-wise between Adeniyi and Highsmith? Because I think they're going to spell both of them regularly or often. I'll say that.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I think TJ Watt's going to be pushing it in the 90% because I think but he played a lot of snaps last game too. So that's just one thing. I think Watt's not going to get a blow nearly as much. You could maybe even see Jaron Elliott thrown in there a little bit too. But I think Highsmith is going to see at least 60% of those snaps.
What about you, Brian? You think they're going to be predominantly Highsmith, or do you think it's going to be closer to 50-50 between Adeniyi and Highsmith?
I think the majority goes towards Highsmith. I agree with everything that Dave said there. I really think that he was drafted, and somebody put this in the live chat earlier, but he was drafted to replace Bud Dupree next season, with everybody expecting him to go to another team, with them not putting a franchise tag on him. So he is just getting elevated a whole lot earlier. They will spell him, but it's his time to really audition and get started a lot earlier than July and August of 2021.
Yeah, very good.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Sure, Dave.
I do want to hear what you want to say, Jeff. I also think a lot of it's going to be the first half is going to tell us a lot.
Yeah.
That I think Highsmith will get the majority of them in the first half. And they'll give some to Adeniyi, and whoever's playing better is going to see an increase in the second half. It could be that it's more 50-50 in the first half, and then that expands more into one more than the other.
I'll say 70-30 for that question. I think the 70% to Highsmith, because I do think they're going to use Adeniyi to spell both Watt and Highsmith. And so they're going to have those two bookends, and they're going to have the third guy bounce back and forth and help. I think Adeniyi is capable of rushing from both sides. I like Adeniyi's game, by the way. Like, I want to make that very clear. I think that he is great at getting after the passer. He's definitely not as good in run support, and that's an issue. But I do like Adeniyi's game. I think that a combination of Highsmith and Adeniyi can be very effective opposite TJ Watt. That's something that's worth noting, by the way. All right. You guys ready for some over-under?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Let's start off with Ben Roethlisberger touchdown passes. We'll go with 2.5. 2.5. Dave, we'll start with you.
I'm going under. I'll go 2.
Okay. Brian Anthony Davis.
Give me the over. Let's go 3.
Oh, I like it. I'm going to go under with 2. Let's go with Steelers rushing yards. This is so depressing that I'm even setting the line at this. I guess is disgusting. I mean, this is the Steelers, guys. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got a text from a buddy of mine who's a Dolphins fan who's watching the game on Wednesday night, and he hates the Ravens as much as we do. And he said, am I watching the Pittsburgh Steelers that are on 4th and 1? They're going shotgun empty and throwing the ball. And I'm like, I know, man, this is what it's turned into. But
and the offensive coordinator throwing the quarterback under the bus on that play as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's Ben Randyland. That's Ben drawing up the plays. Oh, but when it's successful, no, he's not really drawing up the plays. Get out of here. Anyways, rushing yard line at 80 yards, over, under. Brian.
I'm actually going to say over.
Ooh.
Now, if you are going to pierce the Washington football team's defense in any way, it's probably against the run, where they rank only 15th. They're giving up 114, almost 115 yards per game. So I'll say over. Somebody's going to break one.
I hope so. Dave, over, under.
I'm going to say under, simply because, yes, that is their weakness. But look at all these other teams the Steelers have faced in recent weeks that are even further down the list when it comes to stopping the run, and they still couldn't get 50 yards against them. It's not as much that I don't know that they won't. I don't care how many yards they get. I don't care how often they run the ball. I would like them to run it effectively when they do run it. I would love to say over for this because I would like to see them running the ball to close out the game. I'm just not sure that that's going to be what it is. So that's what I'm going to say under.
As you say, Brian, they give up 115 on the ground, but the Steelers average 99.1 yards on the ground. That's atrocious. I'm going to say under. I don't think the Steelers are capable of running the ball with any efficiency right now. The stat that I'm looking for the Steelers the most is their yards per rush. That's what I want to see improve. I don't care about total yards. I want to know, like what Dave said, when they run it, can they do it effectively? And as of right now,
3.82, 27th in the NFL.
27th at 3.8 yards per game. That's horrible. That's awful. So if that number goes up, I'm totally fine with them not getting 80. Dave's hurt. All right. Let's go. Next, over under defensive sacks. That's the Steelers sacking Alex Smith. The line is set at 4. Brian, I know that's what Dave was thinking. Brian, go ahead.
I hate the push, so I'm going over. They're going to get 5. Alex Smith is not mobile. That's the thing.
We understand why, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and we know that. He's smart. He might be able to avoid sacks just with his football intelligence. You're going to have a lot of that in this game, but I still think they're going to be able to get to him.
Okay, Dave?
I'm going to go west. I'm going to say over with 5.
There's been situations, like Dave said, where they've gone against teams that have a glaring weakness, and I'm going to go under. I'm going to say they get 3. And it's one of those situations where everyone's like, look at this. This is a glaring advantage for the Steelers. And for some reason, it just never pans out. I think it was down in Jacksonville where we were like, oh my gosh, are they even going to get a sack on Jake Luton? I mean, Jacksonville had given up a ton of sacks, and it wasn't until the second half when they were forced to throw it further downfield. But still, I'm going to go under. Next, Steelers sacks surrendered to Mr. Sweat and Young. Guys, we'll set the line at 2.5. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to say under. I don't know that they can keep Ben clean like they have the last 4 games or the last 5 out of 6 games. But just because of how good the Washington football team is at getting at the quarterback. But I'm hoping that they can slow them down to where they don't have more than 2.
Brian?
I don't see them keeping them clean. I realize what Dave said. I'm going with the over. I think that they're going to go ahead and get them 3 times.
To me, this depends. If Hassenauer's playing, then I think it might be an over. It might be a three spot. Because they have some great young rushers. Their front four is really good. Jack Del Rio's done a good job coaching them up over there in Washington. I'm going to go with over. If Pouncey plays, different story. Just so for the record. Okay, next, Chase Claypool. Always do this one. Chase Claypool touchdowns, 1.5, over under. Brian, what do you think?
Let's go under. He's going to have one, but it'll be under.
Okay, Dave?
Sure. Sounds good, Brian.
I'm going to go over. I think he hits pay dirt a couple times. Next, turnovers, meaning the Steelers turning the ball over. The line set at 1. Brian?
It's going to be a clean game. They are not going to get any.
I like it. What about you, Dave?
I'm going to push.
You think they turn it over once? Fumble or interception?
Fumble. Strip sack.
Oh, gosh, stop it. I'm going to go under. I think it's a clean game as well. Let's go defensive takeaways now. Over under set at 2. Brian, go ahead.
I think it's going to be a push right at 2.
Dave?
I'm going over with 3.
Ooh. I'm going to go with 3 as well. I think they might get a strip sack like Dave just mentioned of Alex Smith, and that might add to a couple INTs there. A lot of
batted balls at the line is what I'm hoping.
There you go. All right, John Knox puts $5 in the tip jar. He says, how did they run so well the first 6 weeks and now they struggle? The line is pretty much the same. That's a really good point. And I mean, we'll throw it to you guys. Dave,
scheme. But
why would the scheme change so much? That's what I don't understand.
It didn't. You've telegraphed when you're going to run the ball. The more film the teams have on the Steelers as time goes on, and you know exactly what's going to. I mean, when they can say, okay, when you see this player and they line up this way, they're going to run this way, and then they do, it makes it that much easier to stop it. That's why.
Okay, what about you, Brian?
Let me take Dave one step farther. When you see number 65 being eligible in the game, you know they're going to run. So
not this game.
Well, yeah,
he's still on the COVID list,
and he's still on the COVID list. But that's. I'm not talking about this game. I'm talking about overall,
right? Why
they haven't been running the ball well, because last year it was number 72 gave everything away. Now it's number 65. So, and when they get to rely on, and we talked about this a lot earlier in the show, when they relying on the Todd Haley style offense, hey, Todd Haley was right years ago. We just didn't want to admit it, but it's working now. And they have the guys that are able to pull that off a whole lot better than they did back in 2013, 14, around those times. So what I'm saying right now, they found a formula that's working a little more. There's de-emphasis on running the ball now.
Yeah. Okay, we have a super sticker. I don't even know what that is.
You couldn't see it there. It's a little guy that comes up and says, "Hey, you," and he's dancing around. I think people on YouTube can see it.
Thank you for the $2 super sticker. That's pretty sweet. I wish I could see it. I'll go back and watch it on replay. Wes Hickok, $5. He says, I want to take a moment to thank the 3 of you and the whole team for continuing to deliver so much high quality content. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Wes, longtime listener and viewer of the program and our channel. We thank you very much. Hopefully everyone that's listening to this or watching this, wherever, on whatever platform, you check out our audio platform. Anywhere where you get your podcast, search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, and you'll find all of our shows. It's worth the listen, trust me. Okay, let's get to the prediction time. All right, Dave, what's the updated line? There's another super sticker.
Yeah, I'm trying.
What is this one?
It's a guy that says "cool" and he's is it a pear? What is that thing?
I can't see it.
I can't either.
No, it's only on you. I have it up on. I have the YouTube up on my my phone here. So
all right. Anyways, enough super stickers. What is the line now? Because when I made my pick, it was 7.5.
It's changed a decent bit. I should have made sure I had this up here. When you go to Odd Shark and look at the consensus, I mean, it's gone from 10 down to 8 right now. It is 6.5.
Yes. Good. Okay. 6.5.
Over under is 43.5.
43.5. Okay. When I put my pick in this week, it was 7.5, and I think 42.5. But Brian, let's start with you. How do you see this game playing out? What's your prediction?
So I'm thinking this is a 28-20 Pittsburgh Steelers win. I think they drown out all the noise, but listen to it enough to know what they need to do. And the noise that they're listening to the most will be what's coming from Mike Tomlin. Now, I'm not saying that's noise, but it's going to be loud enough to permeate inside their craniums to know that this man saying we've got to pick it up, they're going to pick it up. They are going to play a fairly clean game, and they're going to find a way to win. If they could possibly break 30 against Washington. I know how good they are in points per game, but I really think this team is motivated. This team knows how to score. I think they're going to do everything they can to just shut out all the junk that they've been hearing and say, hey, we belong here.
Dave, what's your prediction?
All right. Well, to get to this, there's some things that frustrate me. People want to go on and on and on about the Steelers and early, especially before they played the Browns and the Ravens and the Titans, about how look at the records of these teams that they've beaten. Oh yeah, they're 5-0, they're 6-0, but they have such a terrible record. But everyone's all up on Washington. They're a team on the rise. Okay. They are entering this game 4-7, and their 4 wins. Nobody that they've beaten has more wins than they do. They've beaten 3-7 or 3-8, 3-8, 3-7-1, who's now 3-8-1. Okay. And 2-8-1, who's now 2-9-1. That's all they've beaten. They beat the Eagles to start the season, which were like, wow, that's a big. Now look, the Eagles, they look like a mess today. Okay. They've beat the Cowboys twice, and they beat the Bengals after they took out Joe Burrow. So not intentionally, but you know what I mean. I don't want to say like that. Didn't want that to come off like they were playing dirty and took him out, No, Joe Burrow left the game when they were playing them. So it's funny because so many people were saying, take the football. I'm going to say it, Brian, take the football team in this one, even got a message from Lance Williams. He's taking the football team in this one. Okay. And things like that, because there's this team. But where's the narrative of they haven't beaten anybody like the Steelers had to face so much? Because they really haven't beaten anybody. They do have a good defense. You should look past them. I would be more worried about this game if the Steelers would have blown the doors off of Baltimore. The fact that they played so poorly and had to get reamed out after the game by their coach, because that was the report. He wasn't just that way with the reporters in his thing. He was 10 times worse with the players after the game. So I'm thinking that the offense is not going to sputter, and the defense is going to be the defense that we know that they can be. I'm going to go 28-10.
Okay. I like that score.
Sorry that I gave such a long.
No, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. For me, I look at this game and I think that this is a tough one because I do think that the Washington football team is an improving team. No, Dave, I agree with you that they, in terms of their pedigree or resume, is not very good at all, but still, I think that this game,
they're a good team.
They can be. They're a good defense, and they have some young skill. They have a lot of good skill position players on offense. Young skill position players like McLaurin and Gibson at running back. They're a good offense that's up and coming. Now, we'll say this: this is a game that I think I could be totally wrong about. No, I'm not picking the Steelers to lose. Just so you know, I think that this could turn into a game that reminds me of. Brian, help me out with the year they played Carolina on Thursday night, and it was literally like a bloodbath.
I'm going to say that was
2017. Am I right?
Was he right, Brian?
Yeah, it was. I believe it was 2017 as well.
And if you remember in that game, the opening kickoff went to Carolina. Cam Newton takes him down, scores a touchdown. Everyone thinks, oh, great, here we go. It was a swing pass to Christian McCaffrey. They got Vince Williams in coverage, and he walks into the end zone. And everyone's thinking the same thing. Here we go. What happens next? Bomb to Juju, and literally the floodgates open. I could see
the next play, wasn't it Vince Williams scoring the touchdown?
A pick six. Yeah, I think you're right. I could see this game getting ugly in terms of score. I wouldn't be shocked at all. But I also am going to stick with my gut in terms of when I looked at the numbers, when I really thought about this game. I'm going to go with the Steelers winning 27-17. So I think the Steelers are going to win. Would not be shocked if, like what Brian said, they hang up 30 and they have a dominant performance. They're focused, and they have to understand at this point in time, you're in the final stretch here. This is when you need to be playing your best football. And they have some tough games coming up. You talk about at Buffalo next week. You talk about Indianapolis coming to Pittsburgh in a couple weeks. I don't want to downgrade Cincinnati, but I mean, without their quarterback, and now they lost their backup quarterback today, I think as well, it's not the same. We'll get to those in a second, but still.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Why is nobody talking about this great defense? It's almost like because they're undefeated, how good the Steelers defense is not what's being discussed. I mean, this defense is amazing. And yeah, they lost Bud Dupree, but their defense is so much more than Bud Dupree. You know, I don't get why people were just all of a sudden. I mean, look, they're giving up 17 points a game, and people are all of a sudden thinking that the teams are going to come in and put all these points up on them. I don't understand.
They're not, and you think about it. I mean, TJ Watt is probably one of the best defenders in the NFL, and he's definitely the best defender on the Steelers. But they also have a really good defense in general. I mean, from top to bottom, and none of them are that flashy. And what I mean by that is that you don't have guys. Let's look back to the other great Steelers defenses that did get a lot of pub. You had guys like Joey Porter. You had guys like James Harrison. You had in my opinion, a transformative talent in Troy Polamalu. I don't think they have those type of players on this team. That doesn't mean that they're not as good. Not at all. I just think that right now,
they're a solid unit.
Yes. First and foremost, everyone is just all over the soup du jour, the soup of the day. And it goes from basically the Chiefs to whatever NFC team is good that week. You know, now it's the Saints, it was the Seahawks, or it could be the Packers. Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, the Steelers are that prize fighter from way back in the day that, you know, they're nothing flashy, but they just keep on winning fights. They're Larry Holmes is really what they are. Larry Holmes, back in the 80s, he was the champion for a long, long time, but he never did anything flashy. He just went out there and he won some like 15-round fights. It was never anything. It wasn't when Mike Tyson came along and knocked him out in the first round. He was a guy that he would just continue to beat you, but he wasn't anybody's champion because there was nothing really glitz and glamour about this guy. Everybody's waiting for everybody's waiting for Mike Tyson to come in, which is basically the Chiefs at this point. They're waiting for them to get that matchup with them and knock this team out. But you know what? They keep on going without the flash, without the hoopla, and they are going to be golden. That's all they need to keep on continuing to do. So people aren't really looking at this team. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. What if they're there to catch that shoe so it doesn't hit the ground?
That's a good point. Here we go. We have a couple super chats here. Let me find the one. There we go. $2. 24/7 Juju scoring twice if he's healthy. Would love that. Would absolutely love that. Grayson Brown gives us $5. Said media is short-term memory. 72 Dolphins point differential is very similar to the Steelers this year. They had no-name defense. We don't. Pittsburgh wins 28-20. I don't care how much they win by. As long as they win.
I'm still surprised that people are thinking, you know, that a team like Washington is going to put up 20 points on the Steelers. That's the thing that I don't understand with people is that we keep giving these point totals. I mean, when's the last time the Steelers gave up 20 points?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Wasn't it the Ravens the first time?
Let me check. I have that.
I'm pretty sure. It was the 24 to the Ravens the first time.
It was
the last time that they've given up 20 points.
You are correct. Week 8.
Just my point. Hey, you ready for a quick trivia?
Let's do a quick trivia.
Okay. Ben Roethlisberger has appeared, including the postseason, in 250 games. He has started 248 of them. He is currently on a streak where he has not been sacked in 4 straight games in 5 out of the last 6. How many of those 250 games do you think he has not been sacked? Closest number wins. It's like guess the jelly beans in the jar.
So 250 games.
Out of 250 total games, how many games in there do you think he hasn't been sacked at all?
45. That's probably way too high. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm going to see 30.
And the winner by 1 goes to Brian Anthony Davis because it's almost right in the middle of you two. It's 37.
Oh,
It's
wow.
almost,
Okay.
you guys basically split it on both sides. One was off 8, one was off 7.
Well,
So
Price is Right
37.
rules. I'm out right away because it's close without going over.
But one thing I found in this that I found very, very interesting. Now, I'm not counting, these have to actually be consecutive games played where Ben played in the games for the Steelers. Like if Ben played and wasn't sacked, but then got hurt and didn't play for 2 weeks and then came back and played and wasn't sacked, that didn't count. You know, they're on a 4-game streak of not being sacked. Since Ben Roethlisberger was drafted in 2004, not counting this one, they've only ever gone back-to-back games without him being sacked 4 times.
Wow.
And they've gone 4 this time. So it's
Like,
what's happened recently is a very big deal. And I don't know that people realize how big a deal it is.
And everybody hates this offensive line.
Yeah.
Not us, but
it also
thinks they're
helps that
garbage.
he's leading the league in time to snap to release too. It's all of it working together. And that's what people have to understand. It's just like why the defense is so good. It's all of them working together.
All right, quickly here. Let's do bold predictions that aren't involving Bougie, Juju's dog. And for those that don't know, this is a spinoff of an article that runs tomorrow on game day as Bold and Bizarre Predictions. You can also hear it in podcast form. Will that be running tomorrow, Brian? Or did we already do that?
No, we don't do that in podcast form.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind.
I offered to
I'm
do it.
seriously
You're
losing
like,
my mind. Okay, so this will be an article. You're right. I did say that. All right, so this will be an article tomorrow on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. You check it out. Brian, what is your bold prediction for this game?
Looks like I better write that article, huh?
Yeah.
Actually, one that I'm thinking of putting in there, and I'm just going to go with it. My X Factor, Deontay Johnson, 3 touchdowns.
Okay. Dave Schofield, what's your bold prediction?
That was mine last week. Was Deontay Johnson 3 touchdowns?
Really?
Yeah.
I don't pay attention.
You ready? I'm going to go Alex Highsmith 2 sacks.
I like it. I'm going to go, if I'm going to say a bold prediction, it's going to be that James Washington leads the team in receiving yards.
Ooh,
Maybe not touchdowns, but receiving.
Maybe not
yards.
Receptions.
But receiving yards.
It could be long.
It could just be a couple big passes. I think that you're going to see more James Washington. You hear comments from Mike Tomlin. You hear comments from Fiedner and Ben. They want to see more of him. I don't know who they're going to sit down for him to play more, but we'll see. That's my bold prediction. All right. Final thought time, guys. Let's go around the room here and give our final thoughts before they play the football team Monday evening. Go ahead, Brian.
Dave said something earlier that I really believe in. I agree with this. The fact that if the Steelers would have blown out the Ravens like everybody expected them to do, everybody thought they should have, then they might have a lot of trouble with this game. But there's a time when you look at all of your detractors and you look around the locker room and you look in the eyes and you link hands with them. Now, I'm saying that metaphorically because we're not linking hands in 2020. But what I'm saying is you go ahead and you share your life with this team. You've got hopes that are the same. You've got dreams and goals that are all the same. And you may have let the media and the fans down, but that doesn't mean anything. You let yourself down last week. When Ben Roethlisberger comes out, when Mike Tomlin comes out, says us sucking, when Ben says, I was terrible, we need to do better as a team, we know who that was pointed to. But when Juju Smith-Schuster, the party boy of the whole team, comes out and says, we were not good enough, that means something. That means that they are taking this to heart. They are going to come out and shock everybody except themselves, and they are going to take it to the Washington football team because they believe, and it's time to show their true colors. And their true colors, let's go ahead, apologies to Cyndi Lauper, but their true colors are not the rainbow. They are black and gold.
Cyndi Lauper. We went from Mr. Belding to Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah.
That's what you get, Facebook.
All right, Dave, what's your final thoughts?
Okay, a few things, and so I'll make them very brief. But Christopher 11 says something in the live chat that I just have to go with. He says this game is going to be like the Cincinnati game. The Cincinnati game was a team that didn't have very good record. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, the Steelers, you had to look out for them after that bad performance against the Cowboys," and they came out and blew them and blew the doors off of them. This is what the Steelers need to do. Now, am I guaranteeing that this is what they're going to do? No, because as we know, in 2020, nothing is guaranteed. If the Steelers come out and put up back-to-back poor performances, then Steelers Nation should be very concerned. I don't look for them to do that. And I think that as Jeff Hartman says, the only people I'm pretty sure this was a Let's Ride. The only people that are going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, before I go, I have to say this to all of you out there listening. If this is specifically to anyone, I mean, this was good for everyone, but I'm saying specifically, if you are someone who played high school football, possibly coached high school football like I used to, or have been emotionally invested in a high school football program through family member or just anything like that, there is one of the most, I can't even describe what I mean to it. An article that meant so much to me that is on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com right now is by KT Smith. He is a high school coach in New Jersey. It's entitled "Football in the Pandemic: A Season Like No Other." It's a little bit longer read, but trust me, it is worth it. He chronicles his high school football team and what they went through with the pandemic and parallels it to what's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I got choked up several times reading this. It's that type of article. If there's one thing I know Brian's going to kill me for saying, rather than listen to a podcast, I'd rather you go read this article. That's how much I can endorse this right there.
That's okay. That's okay, because I'm thinking of turning it into a podcast.
Yes, that's a good idea, because it's a story that needs to be out there. It really meant a lot to me. The outpouring of the people that have taken the time to read it is like, this is absolutely amazing. I had to step away and read it somewhere else. I didn't want my family to see me cry, things like that. And the things that are, that not only, of course, the NFL is dealing with this pandemic, but this is hitting the sport of football much harder at a much younger level. So go check that out. If you do anything, please take that away and go check out that one. It's fantastic.
And just so people know that if you're familiar with BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, we do put out a lot of content. And so articles can get kind of flushed down, what we call the stream. I've pinned that where it is on the site, so it won't be moving anywhere. So it will always be there in that same spot if you ever want to go and check it or get interactive in the comment section or something like that. But it is a very good read. Dave took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to add that if he didn't. My final thoughts are simple. Just win the game. Literally, just win the game. At this point, who cares? Who cares what it looks like? Just win the game. Win the game, clinch your playoff spot, hope for the best in terms of all the other results. Who cares? You control your own destiny. As 11-0, no one else matters, period. Because you have set yourself up to control your own destiny. That's what we always want with the Steelers. We don't want to have to scoreboard watch. Yeah, it's fun to do it, but we don't have to want to rely on it. Yeah, we're rooting for the Denver Broncos to upset the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, but ultimately, they don't matter either. Because if the Steelers keep winning, guess what? Number 1 seed, period. So there you go, folks. That's all I'm going to say about that. We'll finish it on that. We will be back. The three of us will be back tomorrow, Monday afternoon. Well, it'll be Monday night. Monday night as our post-game podcast, and we'll be doing that on Facebook as well. We'll do most of our shows on Facebook as well as YouTube. So check us out. BehindTheSteelCurtain.com should be your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. Wherever you get your podcasts, find us by searching Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain. Follow and subscribe. Do whatever you have to do so you don't miss a thing. All right, Dave, send us out.
Hey.
Best way to end the show. We'll see you. Take it easy.